Well, let's have a look at Keir Starmer, along with his Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall. Apparently they're going to solve the mother of all dilemmas and problems that have haunted governments over the years, and that's how to work out a plan to get Britain working again. And the numbers, as you'll be aware, are breathtaking. It's worth highlighting: 9 million economically inactive, 2.8 million on long-term sickness. Can Keir and Liz do it, Chloe?
I mean, as with all of the Labour promises, I just say I'll believe it when I see it now, because I don't trust anything that they say. But trying to change the way that job centres work so that they're not just focusing on trying to help people get their benefits, but actually helping them with CV advice and figuring out what the best sector is for them to work in if they're just lost for direction. I think that that is all good stuff if they can pull it off. But I think that it will definitely not be an easy one to pull off. It will definitely take time to try and get people back in the workforce. I think a lot of people fell out of the workforce during COVID, got out of the habit of it, and it's very hard to get them back in. And of course, COVID caused a heck of a lot of people some horrendous mental health issues. A lot of people still struggling with those mental health issues. On the other hand, you also have the problem of people being diagnosed with mental health issues much more than they ever used to. So I'm sure there are some people who are at home sitting on disability benefit and whatnot because they say, oh, I'm a little bit upset to the doctor, and they've managed to get signed off. So there are a lot of different factors that have led to us ending up in this situation. Yeah. Something has to be done about it. It looks like they're taking a few good steps in the right direction, but I think that this is going to be a difficult one to solve. They won't do it overnight.
We spoke to one guy earlier from a think tank who was telling us, look, it's really quite... getting signed off by the doctor and getting a few quid is one thing. Getting a livable wage out of the benefit system is actually quite tricky. Now, I'm willing to believe that is the case. I wonder, though, Chloe, whether some people are just settling for the smaller benefit. That is still preferable to going out to work. And we can talk forever on what the reasons are. You know, did COVID mess with their head? Is it the case that you think, you know, life's bloody expensive right now, just to pay my rent, travel on a bus or a train, and I'm doing all of that for minimum wage? Blow that for a game of soldiers. I don't want to do it anymore. And if I have to get benefits, even if it's half of what I would get, I'd rather do that than go to work. I wonder if we've got a lot of people in that place.
Yeah, I think that there certainly could be, and that is in part, as you suggested there, Ian, that the cost of living just seems to be skyrocketing. I mean, especially if you live anywhere near London, the rent is just so ridiculous. You know, the thought of slaving away 50, 60 hours a week on minimum wage to then still not to be able to pay your bills. Some people might think, oh, it's just not worth it. On the other hand, as I said, I think a lot of people are just out of the routine of working when they fell into them work from home or put on furlough during COVID. And I just generally think that the younger generation especially, I do think that they're lazy. I do think that they're softer. Many different factors, difficult one to solve for sure. Indeed. Let's move to this story then. The petition. Started out. Caused quite a storm, huh?
Well, it really has, because, you know, these things do come and go. They happen all the time. We don't normally take any notice, and there's some of them are a bit mischievous, of people larking around with a daft pledge, and for others it's something more serious. I think this one is about firing a firework up the trouser leg of Keir Starmer. We know we're not going to have an election out of it, but there are 2.6 million signatures now, which is not insignificant. Even acting legend Michael Caine has pitched in on this one. I think Elon Musk might have had something to say about it as well. So if nothing else, it's gained sufficient profile, you'd think, to at least make Number 10 aware of a lot of feeling out there. I don't know what that translates to in reality, but it's got to have some effect, right?
Well, I think the effect is that this is very, very embarrassing for Keir Starmer. It's, as you say, Ian, this is not going to result in a general election. They may end up debating it in Parliament, but there's no way, you know, you're not going to have turkeys voting for Christmas. You're not going to have the Labour Party suddenly putting their hands up and saying, oh, 2.6 million people want a general election, so let's have one and let's lose a bunch of our seats. Absolutely no way. But it just adds to the feeling of this Labour Party just going downhill so quickly. Their approval ratings, they just plummeted so quickly as soon as they got into power. It's just gone down and down. In terms of Keir Starmer's response to this, what will we see from him? Well, we've already seen him responding this, just saying, oh, it's just people who aren't Labour voters. completely failing to acknowledge people's genuine grievances and frustrations. You know, if he came out and said, look, I'm really sorry, I know we made these promises to you before the general election and we have failed to meet those promises, we're doing everything that we can, we're in a difficult situation, maybe it would be more understandable. But he's just saying, nope, these just are people who aren't Labour voters, nothing's changed, we haven't broken any promises. That is very frustrating. I think the lack of humility from Keir Starmer is really starting to annoy people. You had the same problem with Keir Starmer refusing to acknowledge people's grievances when we had the riots, of course, just dismissing everyone, whether they were a genuine protester or a rioter, as just far-right thugs refusing to engage in their grievances about mass immigration. That was very frustrating for people as well. No humility at all.
And it's going to be interesting. I mean, I don't know what form a debate this will take. It's going to be fascinating to hear various politicians stand up, assuming I mean, they don't have to debate it, but it has to be considered for debate. I mean, that's going to be a popcorn moment, isn't it? Just to hear what various... we can imagine the faces that will stand up, but it's going to be interesting to watch.
It certainly will be. I will definitely be tuning into that debate if it happens. As you say, they just have to consider it for a debate. They might just say, this is nonsense, we're not going to bother. But I hope that it does go ahead. I'm sure that the likes of Farage and whatnot will put pressure on them to try and make sure this debate happens. And I'm sure they'll be eager, the Reform Party, to stand up and make their points. I mean, one of the reasons this petition has got so many signatures is because of people like Nigel as well as Elon Musk sharing it on X. So it would be very interesting to hear the damning words that the opposition parties have to say if this is debated. Indeed. And to see the hilariously pathetic responses coming out of Keir Starmer's mouth, no doubt, in response. Indeed. Talking of hilariously pathetic, judges at the Supreme Court are very, very busy at the moment, Chloe, because they're trying to work out. And there's a lot of questions that, you know, man has never fathomed the answer to, but this one is an absolute blinder. No one can really fully answer this, apparently. What is a woman? I mean, it's tricky. I mean, you probably consider yourself to be a woman, but, you know, I might consider myself to be a woman as well. And, you know, some people say that's OK if I want to think that. I mean, it's all garbage, but this is what the Supreme Court are looking at to decide if sex in law refers to biologically or legally recognised sex. I mean, who could have imagined this 10 years ago? If you'd have discussed this in a pub and said, oh, you see what they're doing at the Supreme Court? Everyone would have just laughed and said it was fake news. I mean, it is crazy how things have changed in just a few years. I remember one of the videos that Donald Trump put out shortly after he was elected, setting out what he's going to do. You know, he pointed out the fact that, you know, none of these genders existed a couple of years ago. Yeah. So we're going to delete them all. The government's only going to recognise 2 genders. I think that it is... On a more serious note, I do think it is important for us to establish in law what a woman is, because there have been difficulties and the police have struggled knowing what to do when, you know, they've had calls from people saying so-and-so is being transphobic or whatever, or cases of single-sex spaces, how to deal with those, because, for example, the Equality Act is very, very unclear, because it was written in a time when it wasn't really a question, what is a woman? Everyone just knew what it was. So it does actually need updating. It does need to be clearer in law so that we can actually enforce the law properly and we can have clarity about how we operate with single-sex spaces, for example. I mean, I hope that they choose the common sense definition and not a woke definition. I know that there are certainly difficulties when it comes to defining it, when you have these few people who, for example, they have an XY chromosome, but their body doesn't produce testosterone. You get some people who have thought they're a woman that their whole lives, and then there's been a chromosome test and it turns out that on the chromosome it looks like they're a man. So you get these few freak cases, and that's what's made them defining it perhaps difficult in some cases. But I don't think that because of those few very, very rare freak cases, we should then allow anybody who is born a biological man just based on their feeling to decide that they are a woman and just walk into our locker rooms, our changing rooms, our prisons. It's crazy, isn't it? And I was reading yet another story today of a sex offender who had decided,
I don't know whether it was halfway through the case or during the case, that they were now a woman. I mean, you know, I'm sorry to get kind of, I don't want to body shame anybody or go solely on looks, but this was a bloke, right? This was a geezer. And apparently had worked in social care of some sort and sexually abused a child, and has now gone to jail for this, but at some point during the trial decided they were a woman. Now, we can all get... What I found weird, by the way, Chloe, the Daily Mail then referred to this person as a she, which I thought was extraordinary. This was the Mail Online, and the Mail Online is different to the newspaper, as we all know. So, you know, they're looking at a sort of a global audience. But the fact that they rolled... I mean, the story was about the weirdness of the fact that a sex offender had changed to a woman and then went on to very kindly use female pronouns to this horrific
I've seen that in loads of articles, actually.
Yeah,
about
absolutely.
Similar cases to this.
What's that all about?
In papers that are criticising... I don't know. I guess they're being careful and they're scared themselves to be called transphobic and to have some kind of legal case mounted against them. So they think, oh, we better tiptoe carefully and use the right pronouns. On articles about Elon Musk's son, who now thinks that he is a girl, articles that are critical, that when I was reading about that, they use she, her pronouns to refer to the kid who is a boy biologically. It's interesting. I think the media, they want to report on the story and make a show of it, but they also don't want to get themselves in trouble either. Yeah, seems that way. Listen, Chloe, thank you. That is Chloe Dobbs, political commentator, with us on the programme. Thank you to her.